Every empire believes it will last forever. The Romans thought their glory was eternal. The British believed the sun would never set on their empire. Even the Soviets were certain that history was on their side. And yet, one by one, each of them collapsed. And now, the same question looms over America.
The golden age of America begins right now. We will be the envy of every nation. I will very simply put America first.
For nearly a century, the United States has stood as the most powerful nation in human history. A country with just 4% of the world's population has managed to control 20% of its income and nearly 40% of its military spending. The American flag has flown over every continent, its culture has dominated the global stage, and its dollar has been the lifeblood of the world economy. But here's the problem. No empire, no matter how powerful, has ever escaped the cycle of rise and decline. Rome thought it was invincible. The British Empire ruled over a quarter of the planet. Both eventually crumbled under the weight of debt, division, and complacency. So, is America next? The signs are everywhere. Debt spiraling out of control, factories shutting their doors, inequality splitting the nation in two. And across the Pacific, a rival quietly rising, biding its time and preparing for a new world order. Some say America is still untouchable, that the 21st century will remain an American century. Others warn we're already watching the slow-motion collapse of the last global superpower. So tonight, we'll explore the truth. Has America already crossed the point of no return? And if so, who will shape the world that comes next? Chapter 1. The American Century. Rise and Peak. To understand where America is today, we need to look back to when its power seemed unshakable. At the end of World War II, Europe lay in ruins, Japan was devastated, and the Soviet Union was isolated behind an iron curtain. America, meanwhile, emerged stronger than ever. Its factories had not been bombed. Its industries were booming. Its currency, the dollar, quickly became the backbone of the global economy. In fact, by the mid-20th century, America wasn't just another country. It was the foundation of a new world order. The dollar became the world's reserve currency. Its military stretched across oceans, with bases in Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. And its culture, Hollywood, Coca-Cola, rock and roll, captured the imagination of billions. By the 1990s, things looked even better. The Soviet Union collapsed, leaving the United States as the world's sole superpower. Francis Fukuyama, a famous political thinker, even declared it was the end of history. Capitalism and democracy had won. The statistics back this up. By 1995, the US dollar made up 71% of the world's foreign exchange reserves. America wasn't just part of the system, it was the system. Even countries that had once resisted capitalism like Russia, Poland, and Vietnam started opening up their markets and imitating America's economic model. It seemed unstoppable. The American dream wasn't just a slogan anymore, it was an export. The United States was held up as the model for prosperity and freedom. But while America was celebrating its dominance on the other side of the Pacific, a very different story was quietly unfolding. Chapter 2. Cracks in the Empire. For a long time, no one thought America's dominance could be challenged. But history shows us something important. Empires rarely collapse in a single dramatic moment. Their decline is slow, almost invisible, like cracks spreading through the foundation of a building. And in America, those cracks began to show. The first crack? Debt. In 2000, the US government's national debt was around $5 trillion. By 2024, it had ballooned to $36 trillion. That means 1 out of every $6 the government spends now goes toward paying interest, and the projections are terrifying. By 2034, US debt could reach $54 trillion. That's about $150,000 for every American citizen. The second crack? Manufacturing. In the 1960s, almost 1 in 3 American workers had a job in manufacturing. Today, that number is closer to 1 in 12. Entire towns in the Rust Belt, Detroit, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, went from bustling centers of industry to ghost towns as factories moved overseas in search of cheaper labor. The third crack? Inequality. Since the 1970s, the wealth gap in America has exploded. The top 1% of Americans now control over 30% of the country's wealth, while millions of ordinary workers are stuck earning the same wages they did decades ago. For them, the American dream has become the American illusion, and then perhaps the most dangerous crack of all, division. Political polarization in the US has reached historic highs. Trust in government is at record lows. The left and the right no longer see each other as opponents but as enemies. And history warns us, when empires become divided from within, outside forces rarely have to do much to finish the job. In many ways, the US today looks eerily similar to the Dutch Empire in the 1700s or the British Empire in the 1900s. A global leader weighed down by debt, inequality, and overextension. But as America struggled with its cracks, another nation was carefully building something new. Chapter 3: China's Long Game. China's story is nothing short of extraordinary. In the late 1970s, China was still a poor, largely agricultural society. Hundreds of millions lived in poverty. Few could have predicted that within a generation, it would rise to challenge the most powerful nation in history. But by the 1990s, Beijing had embarked on a radical transformation. Factories began springing up across the country. Millions left rural farms to work in booming industrial cities, and year after year, China's economy grew at a breathtaking pace, over 9% annually for decades. The results were staggering. Between 1990 and 2020, China's manufacturing output didn't just grow, it exploded from around $100 billion to nearly $5 trillion. Suddenly, China wasn't just producing clothes and toys. It was producing laptops, smartphones, and the advanced electronics that powered the modern world. And Americans, they became hooked. Today, 97% of laptops and 78% of smartphones sold in the United States are made in China. More than 80% of toys come from Chinese factories. On paper, this meant cheaper goods for American families, but it also meant something else: quiet dependence. The world's most powerful nation had become reliant on its greatest rival. And China wasn't just exporting products, it was exporting influence. In 2013, Beijing launched its most ambitious project yet, the Belt and Road Initiative. Since then, China has poured more than $1.3 trillion into building ports, railways, and power plants across Asia, Africa, and even Europe. The goal was simple: to build the infrastructure of a new world order, with China at the center. And the strategy worked. By 2023, China's approval rating in Africa was higher than America's for the first time in history. Where Washington offered lectures about democracy, Beijing offered roads, power plants, and jobs. It was a patient, deliberate strategy. While America spent trillions on foreign wars, China was building alliances, infrastructure, and long-term partnerships. Where the US burned bridges, China was laying down railroads. And now many experts believe the balance of power is shifting. While America borrowed to consume, China saved to invest. While Washington fought wars, Beijing built trade routes. And while US politicians focused on the next election cycle, China planned for the next century. The result: a rising power perfectly positioned to challenge the old order. Chapter 4: The Multipolar World. For nearly a century, the world has been shaped by a simple idea. There is one superpower, and everyone else is second place. First, it was Britain, then it was the United States. But history is shifting again. And this time, the future may not belong to a single empire at all. Instead, we may be entering something far more complex: a multipolar world. So what does that mean? It means that power is no longer concentrated in one capital, Washington, London, or Rome, but spread across several nations, each carving out their own sphere of influence. And it's already happening. Take India. By population, India has already surpassed China as the world's most populous country. Its economy is growing at one of the fastest rates in the world, fueled by a young workforce, booming tech industry, and a rapidly expanding middle class. In cities like Bengaluru and Hyderabad, new skyscrapers and tech parks rise every year, while Indian companies like Infosys and Tata compete globally. With a population of 1.4 billion and a strategic position between East and West, India is no longer a silent player, it's a contender. Then there's Russia. Though its economy is smaller compared to the US or China, Russia wields power in a different way, through resources. Natural gas, oil, wheat. Russia has become a global supplier of essentials. When war in Ukraine broke out, it wasn't just a regional conflict. It disrupted global grain shipments, spiked energy prices in Europe, and showed how deeply interconnected the world had become with Moscow's resources. For countries in Africa and Asia dependent on cheap food and fuel, Russia remains a critical partner, and don't underestimate the European Union. Though often seen as divided, the EU still holds the world's second-largest economy when measured collectively. With advanced technology, strong industries, and high living standards, Europe remains an anchor in the global system. Its weakness? Political unity. While Washington speaks with one voice, Brussels often speaks with 27. But even with these divisions, the EU's influence is undeniable, especially when it comes to global trade rules, climate policies, and human rights standards. And then there are the Gulf states. Nations like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar have turned oil wealth into leverage. They don't just export crude anymore, they build futuristic cities, buy up stakes in global corporations, and mediate conflicts. Saudi Arabia is already positioning itself as a new financial hub, while Qatar has a leveraged soft power through sports, media, and investment. These once small desert kingdoms are now global power players. Africa, too, cannot be ignored. By 2050, 1 in 4 people on the planet will live in Africa. Its population is young, its cities are growing, and its natural resources are vast. For centuries, Africa was treated as a battleground for others' empires. But in the multipolar future, it may become a center of power in its own right. China, Russia, and the US already see this, pouring billions into African partnerships to secure influence. And finally, technology itself has become a player. In the past, power was measured by armies and navies, but in the 21st century, it may be measured by who controls the algorithms, the chips, the satellites, and the energy grids. The race for artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and renewable energy is not just about innovation, it's about survival. Whoever controls these technologies will not just shape the economy, but also the global order. So, what does all this mean for the United States? It means that even if China doesn't completely replace America as the single global leader, Washington's dominance is already under threat from all sides. No longer is the US the unquestioned referee of world affairs. Instead, it's becoming just one powerful voice in a noisy, contested world. And for an empire that has grown used to being number one, that reality may be the hardest to accept. Chapter 5. America's Dilemma. So here is America's great dilemma. The United States still has unmatched strengths. It still commands the world's most powerful military, with a budget larger than the next 10 countries combined. It still controls the dollar, the currency of global trade. Its universities remain magnets for the best minds. Its culture, Hollywood, Netflix, Silicon Valley, continues to capture imaginations everywhere. But beneath these strengths lies a dangerous fragility. Debt is the first and most obvious. Every empire in history that drowned in debt eventually collapsed. The Dutch financed their empire on credit and lost it. The British borrowed to fight wars they could not afford. Today, America spends billions it doesn't have, often on wars it doesn't win. Then there is politics. The United States was once seen as a model of democracy, but in recent years polarization has turned toxic. Gridlock in Washington prevents long-term planning. Politicians spend more time fighting each other than solving problems. And while America argues, rivals are moving ahead with strategies that stretch decades into the future. And then there's the empire trap. History shows us that great powers rarely step back gracefully. Instead, they cling to their dominance, often lashing out in military conflicts that drain their resources even faster. The Romans kept expanding even as their borders crumbled. The British fought to hold on to colonies long after their power had peaked. Today, the United States has military bases in more than 70 countries and has spent trillions on wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Yet neither brought lasting victory, only exhaustion. So America faces a choice. It can try to double down on its fading supremacy, spending more, fighting harder, and resisting the inevitable. Or it can adapt to a new reality, one in which it shares power in a multipolar world. But here lies the problem. History suggests that most empires don't choose wisely. They cling to the illusion of greatness until it's too late. Will America be different? Will America be? Conclusion. The next global order. Every empire falls. Rome lasted for centuries before collapsing under its own weight. The Dutch dominated trade before debt dragged them under. The British ruled a quarter of the world before two world wars broke them. Now, the United States faces the same test. For decades, it has lived in the glow of what was called the American century. But centuries don't last forever. The golden age of American dominance may already be behind us. The question is not whether America will decline, but how. Will it fall slowly, fading into the background while others take the stage? Will it fracture suddenly under the weight of debt and division? Or will it reinvent itself, finding new strength in innovation and unity? And then there is the bigger question, who comes next? Will the 21st century belong to China with its factories, railways, and long-term plans? Will it belong to India with its vast population and booming economy? Or will we see something new, a multipolar world where no single empire dominates and power is shared among many? One thing is certain, the world we are entering will look very different from the one we are leaving behind. America's dream was always that it was exceptional, immune from history's cycle of rise and fall. But history is patient, and it has never made an exception for anyone. So we are left with this final thought. The American empire is not eternal. The cycle has already begun. The only mystery now is what comes after.